guys, welcome back to John's Fantasy Football Podcast. I am John, and I appreciate you guys being here for week 2 of my Fantasy Football Podcast. Thank you guys if you were here for week 1 of my Fantasy Football Podcast, because I talked about games I love and games I hate for week 1. Now, I am doing the same thing for this week. I'm going to talk about games I love and games I hate, trying to give you guys some fantasy advice if you're doing any DraftKings lineups, FanDuel lineups, or if you're just playing in fantasy football leagues and you want to know which players you could start. I am going to give you some advice because these games I love are the games that I think are going to be high scoring. You want to start your players in fantasy football if you have them in these games, or games I hate, games that I think are going to be low scoring and not very good for fantasy football in week 2. So I'm going to get right into it. I'm going to start with the games I love. The first game is the Chiefs at the Jaguars. I'm super excited for this game because it's a rematch of what they did in the playoffs last year, the divisional round. The Chiefs actually won the game without Patrick Mahomes for most of the game. I mean, Chad Henne came in and was the quarterback and actually won that game against the Jaguars. But the Jaguars, I think, are going to be better this season. But I'm excited for this matchup because they played last season, like I said, and it was 27-17 for the Chiefs. Now, Christian Kirk, they played in the regular season as well, and Christian Kirk had over 30 fantasy points. That was the week that he was my number 1 weekly pick, and he had a great game. He had 9 catches, 120 yards or something, 2 touchdowns. So I think that this Jaguars passing offense is going to have a good game. Now, I want to talk about that Jaguars offense because Chris Jones is expected to be back after signing a 1-year deal with the Chiefs. So I think that ETN is going to struggle a little bit. Now, you're still starting him in fantasy, but I wouldn't throw him into those DraftKings or FanDuel lineups because of his limited upside with Chris Jones back. I think this is going to be more of a passing game. And with the Chiefs looking at Calvin Ridley because of how well he just did in week 1, I think Christian Kirk is going to get more opportunities this week than he did last week. So I think it'll be more of a balanced approach between feeding Ridley and feeding Christian Kirk, but I would try to get both those guys as well as Trevor Lawrence into your lineup this week. I also do like ETN. It's tough to sit him, but I wouldn't expect him to go off this week. Now, hopefully Kelsey plays. He's been limited in practice, and hopefully he does play in this game. Now, if he doesn't play, I still like some other players on the Chiefs offense, but I don't love anybody. I mean, Pacheco doesn't really intrigue me that much. McKinnon out of the backfield. CEH is now questionable heading into this week. So there's a lot of mouths to feed, and who knows who's going to be able to step up. Look, Tony had a really, really bad game last week. Rashee Rice caught a touchdown. I mean, it's a very unpredictable offense because do they just go to Valdez-Scantling? Do they give Tony another chance? Do they say, you know what, let's give Sky Moore another chance? Or let's just feed Rashee Rice because he was the one that caught the touchdown pass and made some plays in week 1? It's just very unpredictable. So in terms of the Chiefs offense, if you're going to start anybody, it would be Mahomes. But you're obviously starting Kelsey if he's there. But I'm worried about that Chiefs offense this week in terms of all the different players that can contribute and which one is actually going to pop off. So in terms of the Chiefs, I would just stick with Mahomes on that one because obviously it's Mahomes. Now, the second game I love for this week is actually the game I love the most. And I'm going to tell you guys why. Because it is the Seahawks at the Detroit Lions. Now, this game is going to be so high scoring, and if you guys have any players in this matchup, you need to get them into your lineup because guess what? These teams played in 2021, and they played in 2022, which was last year. Now, in 2021, the Seahawks won 51-29. That's 80 total points. That's insane. Now, guess what? Last year when they played, the Seahawks won 48-45. That was the game that Rashad Penny blew up for over 100 yards and 2 touchdowns. And Hawkinson had 2 touchdowns for the Lions when he was still on the Lions. And Jamal Williams had over 100 yards and 2 touchdowns as well for the Lions. Now, that was a field goal difference, but they scored almost 100 points in that game. I don't know if it's going to be that crazy this week, but I do think they're going to score at least 3 offensive touchdowns for each team. Now, I like Goff. I like Geno. I like Ken Walker. If you have DK, if you have Lockett, try to get them in your lineups as well. Obviously, you're starting Amon-Ra St. Brown. I would start David Montgomery after 21 carries in week 1. I would also start Jahmyr Gibbs, even though his usage wasn't great, only played 27% of the snaps in week 1. I would still start him in week 2. Now, it depends what other options you have, but in a high-scoring game like this, you're going to want all the players you can get on that Detroit offense. If you even want to stream Sam Laporta in this game, I would be fine with that. It's going to be interesting to see how the Detroit Lions play this offense out after having week 1 being the first game of the NFL season and having 10 days rest to prepare for this Seahawks defense. But either way, this game is going to be super high scoring. So if you have anybody in these matchups, or if you're placing any FanDuel or DraftKings lineups, I would recommend you focus on a game like this. Get a couple players in this game. Take a chance on either Geno or Goff, whichever one you think will have more passing yards, and maybe you do something like that. But either way, I love this game. I'm super excited to see all the points that are going to be scored in this one. And the last game that I like is the Bears at the Buccaneers. And you might be thinking, John, that's a little crazy. You think Justin Fields, Baker Mayfield, they're going to score a lot of points. Now, this is the last of the games that I love, but I do still think that these teams are going to be able to score points. Look, the Bears just let Jordan Love look like Aaron Rodgers. I mean, he was pretty good in Green Bay last week. And Romeo Doubs, 2 touchdowns. Aaron Jones, 2 touchdowns. This offense looked good. They scored 38 points. So I think that the Bears defense is just really bad. And I think that the Buccaneers defense is also not that great. They let Justin Jefferson, I know he's a great receiver, but they still had him go for over 150 yards. They let Addison catch a touchdown, and they let Madison rush one in. That wasn't a super high scoring game, only ended 20-17. But still, I don't think the Buccaneers defense is that great. Now, the best part of the Buccaneers defense is the run game. So if anything, I think that DJ Moore could have a decent game. I know he did not do well in week 1, but Justin Fields, you're still starting him. Nobody in the Chicago Bears backfield yet. DJ Moore, you might want to throw in your lineup, but that's really it for the Bears. In terms of the Buccaneers, Mike Evans had a long touchdown in week 1. I think he could bounce back, and he had I think a 3 touchdown game either last year or the year before against the Chicago Bears. So he plays well against this team. Chris Godwin had about 10 points. He was solid. Rashad White, I would probably get into your lineup. He didn't dominate the snaps like we thought he would, but if there's any game that he could bounce back, it's this one. I wouldn't go crazy over this game in terms of starting players, but just be mindful that this game has the potential to be a 30-30 type, like around 30 type game. Now I'm going to go to the games I hate. So these are games that, like I said, I don't think you should be playing players on your fantasy teams in these matchups, because I think they're going to be low scoring, hard to predict, and only 1 or 2 guys are probably going to score touchdowns. So the first one, you guys could probably guess, it's the Jets at the Cowboys. Now, when the Cowboys are at home, their defense plays very well. So I feel like Zach Wilson, Garrett Wilson, they're going to have a very tough time. Breece Hall, Dalvin Cook, they're going to have a very tough time scoring points. If they get 2 offensive touchdowns, I'd be surprised. But on the other hand, I also think that it's going to be tough for Dak Prescott, CeeDee Lamb, Pollard to get going and score a lot of points on this Jets defense. I think it's going to be pretty low scoring. Now, hopefully the offense opens up, but I would just be mindful of the fact that this game could be lower scoring. So downgrade some of these players. Garrett Wilson, you might want to even consider sitting in the first game without Aaron Rodgers. I know he caught a great touchdown pass against the Bills in week 1, but with Stephon Gilmore on him or Trevon Diggs, it's going to be tough for Garrett Wilson to get a lot of points this week. So if you have better options, if you're in a 4, 6, 8, maybe even a 10-man league, you can consider sitting Garrett Wilson this week. And in terms of players on the Cowboys, I mean, Dak Prescott is probably not going to do that great this week. CeeDee Lamb, you're probably still starting because they can move him around the field, try to get him away from Sauce Gardner. And Tony Pollard, you're probably still starting him after 2 touchdowns in week 1. But just be mindful of the fact that their upside is capped in this situation. The second game is the Commanders at the Broncos. I don't think this is going to be a very high-scoring game. Look, Dulcich is out because he got hurt. Judy is still questionable. He might not even play this week, which means it's really Javonte Williams, maybe Samaje Perine if he gets involved, and Cortland Sutton to catch passes from Russell Wilson. I don't think that's going to be enough to score 2 or 3 touchdowns in this game. Not to mention that Sam Howell and the Commanders actually did struggle in week 1 against the Cardinals, even though they did win that game. I mean, Gibson really struggled. Dotson kind of struggled. McLaurin didn't look great. Brian Robinson did score a touchdown, but that whole Commanders offense did struggle. So I think it's going to be a struggle bus for both teams all day, and I think it's going to end. I'd be surprised if one of the teams got to 20 points. That's how low scoring I think it's going to be. So I would tend to sit players in this matchup if I had the choice. And the last game is the Patriots versus the Dolphins in Gillette Stadium, Sunday Night Football. Look, the Patriots played really well against the Eagles. I mean, Kendrick Bourne had 2 touchdowns. Mac Jones over 300 yards, 3 touchdowns passing. I mean, Ramondre Stevenson caught some passes out of the backfield. So I think this Patriots team is a little bit better than we expected, even with some of the injuries that they've had, especially in the secondary. secondary. And I know Tyreek Hill looked great in week 1, number 1 fantasy player in week 1, and Tua looked great, 466 yards. But the reality is that Belichick is pretty good on the defensive side of the ball, especially on Sunday Night Football in Gillette Stadium. This game, I think, is going to be lower scoring. If you have Tyreek Hill, you're obviously starting him. If you have Tua, I would look at the other options you have. I would rather start a guy like Goff or Geno Smith, as crazy as that might sound. I would rather start them over Tua this week because of the matchup that Tua has. Now, Waddle, you're probably also still getting in your lineup, but just be careful of his upside is limited as well. In terms of the Patriots, I would say Stevenson is probably the only guy you're starting on this offense. I know Bourne, like I said, had 2 touchdowns, but it's tough to predict him to do that well week in and week out. Jacoby Myers is not there. He had a great game for the Raiders, but there's really not that many players for Mac Jones to focus on throwing to. Hunter Henry had a touchdown in week 1, but it's tough to predict who Mac Jones is going to go to and who Belichick is going to game plan for in this game. Because he changes every week. But I would just be mindful of the fact that that game might be a little bit lower scoring than people think. So those are the games I love and the games I hate for this week. I appreciate you guys tuning in for this short podcast. But as always, thank you guys for being here. And if you're looking for my specific fantasy football advice, head over to our TikTok and make sure that you follow us there. Follow and join my live show on Sunday mornings. Every Sunday, 11:45 a.m. Eastern time, I go live on TikTok, gives you guys all my weekly picks, weekly sits, chalkboard streaks picks, rankings for each position, and give you guys last-minute advice based on all the injury reports that come out. And if you're looking for me to DM you throughout the week or even have a phone call, make sure to hit the link down below and join my Patreon, because I appreciate you guys and I love talking to you guys on the Patreon, helping you guys improve your team and get your team better. And stay tuned for next week's podcast, because I might be talking about some buy low trade targets that you guys can target, or some sell high candidates that you guys might have on your fantasy football teams that it's a good time to get rid of after 2 weeks of the NFL season. So I always say, don't overreact after week 1. A lot of things can happen, but come back next week after week 2 and we'll see if we can make any trades for your fantasy football team. But thank you guys for tuning in. I appreciate you, and good luck in your matchups this week. I'll see you on Sunday.